So as a geologist, what I could see is that we are living this rare convergence of three massive cycles of change that very few people are talking about in the mainstream media. Bruce Lipton and I shared it at the United Nations. You mentioned that in the intro. Any one of these three cycles would be enough to turn the world upside down on end. And the fact that all three are converging right now tells us why the change is happening, why there's an openness for new ideas. The three cycles, one we are very aware of is climate. And if only climate were happening, climate change, that'd be enough to change the way we think, the way we grow our food, the way we share resources, the way we interact with one another. There's an economic cycle, 67-year economic cycle that is completing, and by definition, a new one is beginning. And if we don't know that, if we're still thinking about economies, and this isn't only about money, it's about people and the way people work together, share information, and share resources. That's part of the economy. If we are still thinking the way we're thinking 10 or 15 years ago, that's where the struggle and the suffering comes from. The third cycle is fascinating to me, and the United Nations had never heard of this cycle, and I was amazed because I would think that they would. It is a cycle of human conflict. And they said, what do you mean? Doesn't it just happen when it happens? And I said, well, actually, what the science shows is that human conflict ebbs and flows following the rhythms of magnetic fields between the sun and the earth and the human heart. Now, this is where it gets into what's called forbidden territory for science. The human heart is the strongest magnetic field in the human body. It's about 5,000 times stronger than the brain. And what we know, the science is showing us very clearly, peer-reviewed science, is that when the magnetic fields of the earth are strong, we are more cooperative and much less aggressive. And the reverse is true when the magnetic fields are weak. And we are now in a weakening cycle that peaks in the year 2020. So it doesn't mean that we must have conflict. It means that we are vulnerable and susceptible. And if you look at the charts, the ebbs and the flows of the great wars in the past, when they begin and when they end, they also end when these cycles, at the peaks and the valleys of these cycles. It means we are now living the greatest opportunity for peace. The DNA evidence, very recent, in the last 5 years, the DNA evidence no longer supports the theory of evolution as the mechanism for human origins. Evolution is a fact. And I want to be very clear about that. As a geologist, I've seen it in the fossil record, plants, animals, insects, some primates. Something happened 200,000 years ago, and the theory breaks down when it comes to humans. And the DNA shows us that. The DNA shows us very clearly that we did not descend from Neanderthal, for example. Their genome, we can now rebuild their genome and compare theirs to ours. We can actually, sounds like Jurassic Park, the movie. Science fiction, but it's science fact. We can pull the DNA.
You can check your percentage of Neanderthal in
We can pull the DNA from the bone marrow of fossilized remains of beings that we are supposed to be descended from and compare their DNA to ours. We didn't descend from Neanderthal, and it shows that we did appear on Earth about 200,000 years ago.
Where did we come from? Right.
Well, to answer the question, why aren't we sharing this? When I asked my friend at the university, I said, why can't you share this with your students? And he said, Greg, you don't understand. He says, if I shared that, he said, it would invalidate my 40-year career as a professor. And I said, no. I said, it would do just the opposite. It would demonstrate to your young students how valid and relevant science is, because it's designed to be constantly updated, and you're doing that. It wouldn't invalidate. And he said, well, think how much money it would cost to change the textbooks. And I said, my brother, I said, you're living in the Stone Age. They're not using textbooks. You changed it on the server, and you've changed it everywhere. And he said, well, think of all my class notes I would have to change. And I said, well, that's your job. But that was an example for me of it's a habit.